Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live, and Merry Christmas! Right in the midst of the 12 days of Christmas. I'm not sure if it's Lords of Leaping or Swans of Swimming or whatever it is this today, but it is the season of Christmas, especially the season of close proximity to the date of that we celebrate the birth of the Lord. So very Merry Christmas to you. I hope that you are having a very Merry Christmas wherever you are and whoever you are with. You're with us right now, though, on Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest. And we're going to do Christmas questions. But it's Jimmy Akin, so we're going to do Christmas weird questions with Jimmy Akin today. Hi, Jimmy. Thanks for being with us.
Be here, Cy.
And Merry Christmas to you, Jimmy.
Likewise, Merry Christmas, or Happy Christmas, as they say in England.
Oh, that's right. Yes, Happy Christmas to you.
Or Feliz Navidad, as they say in the Spanish-speaking world.
It's funny because you would think that England would say merry. It's merry old England. It's more of an English word than an American word. But we say Merry Christmas and they say Happy Christmas.
Yeah, they also call Santa Claus Father Christmas. So, different strokes.
Yep. All right, Jimmy, we have a collection of weird Christmas-themed questions for you. But by the way, Jimmy, if you don't know, now you know Jimmy. I'm talking to the listener now. If you don't know Jimmy Akin, he's senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, the author of many books, and been doing this for decades here on Catholic Answers Live. And I like to say that, especially I should have introduced Jimmy more carefully, because lots of folks join us during this Christmas season that might not have a chance to join us at other times of the year because you're on vacation or you're in a different spot than you usually are, or you just got some days off work, so you get to join us. So I want to give a special welcome to those who are listening to us for the first time. Catholic Answers is an apostolate in Southern California completely devoted to two things: explaining and defending the Catholic faith. But we're also devoted to having fun during the high seasons of the church, where fun is appropriately called for. So we'll have a little fun today with Jimmy with the weird questions. By the way, also, I should mention, if you like weird questions, Jimmy Akin does a podcast called Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, where I almost said Weird World, where all kinds of weird things are discussed in great depth and very entertaining depth. So you might check out Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. All right, Jimmy, you ready to go to questions?
Yeah, sure.
All right, Nancy Joe asked this. If Mary didn't suffer any labor and birth pain, how exactly did Jesus get out of the womb?
Well, it's not. There's a difference of opinion among Orthodox Catholics about whether Mary suffered labor pains, because after all, in Genesis 3, when the serpent has deceived Adam and Eve and they receive their respective curses, God doesn't say, "I will create labor pains for the first time." He says to the woman, "I will multiply your labor pains."
Yeah.
And so that could indicate that even an unfallen woman would have some labor pains. Also, labor pains are not something that happens just at the moment of birth. They happen leading up to birth, because what causes them is the contractions that prepare for a normal birth through the birth canal. And although the Church teaches that Mary was always a virgin before, during, and after her bearing of Jesus, there have been theologians who have said, well, maybe that's compatible with the idea of Mary having a normal birth. On the other hand, we have startlingly early traditions that Mary did not have a normal birth. I mean, really, really early. Oh. In today's show, we're going to talk about a couple of documents, one of which dates to the 2nd century, that indicates that Mary did not have a normal birth. But I thought to start us out with, I'd quote from a document that actually dates to the 1st century. Oh. This book is actually older than some of the books of the New Testament, a few of them in any event. It's a document called The Ascension of Isaiah, and the book of Hebrews alludes to this book. It doesn't quote from it, but it alludes to it. And it was written, I did an extensive study of the dating of the Ascension of Isaiah a couple of years ago, and I concluded that based on the internal and external evidence, it looks like the Ascension of Isaiah was written in the year AD 67, wow. after the martyrdom of Peter, but before the suicide of Nero. Those are the two events that I can use to bracket very precisely when this document was written, because it clearly reflects the martyrdom of Peter, but it talks about Nero as if he's still alive, and it predicts things that actually didn't happen to Nero. And so that you can say, okay, so it's written before they knew what Nero's final fate would be. And in this book, in chapter 11, we have an account that deals with Jesus's birth. And so, by the way, by my estimate, this is written maybe 4 years after the Gospel of Matthew. And if you're familiar with the Gospel of Matthew, some of this will sound familiar. But here's what the author of the Ascension of Isaiah says in chapter 11 of that book. And I, this is Isaiah, the prophet who's seeing all this in a vision, and I indeed saw a woman of the family of David the prophet named Mary, and virgin, and she was espoused to a man named Joseph, a carpenter, and he also was of the seed and family of the righteous David of Bethlehem, Judah. And he, David, came into his lot, and when she was espoused, she was found with child, and Joseph the carpenter was desirous to put her away, or divorce her. That's something that Matthew mentions. But the angel of the Spirit appeared in this world, and after that Joseph did not put her away, but kept Mary and did not reveal this matter to anyone. And Matthew also mentions that an angel appeared to Joseph and told him, this is of the Holy Spirit, so don't be afraid to take her as your wife. And he did not approach Mary, but kept her as a holy virgin, though with child. And he did not live with her for 2 months. And after 2 months of days, while Joseph was in his house, and Mary his wife, but both alone, it came to pass that when they were alone, that Mary straightway looked with her eyes and saw a small babe, and she was astonished. And after she had been astonished, her womb was found as formerly before she had conceived. So the baby's not in her womb anymore. Her belly is like before she had conceived. And when her husband Joseph said unto her, what has astonished thee? His eyes were opened, and he saw the infant and praised God, because into his portion God had come. And a voice said to them, tell this vision to no one. Now, vision in this case does not mean an unreal sight. It means don't tell anybody what you just saw. Okay. And the story regarding the infant was noised abroad in Bethlehem. Some said, the Virgin Mary hath borne a child before she was married 2 months. And many said, she has not borne a child, nor has a midwife gone up to her, nor have we heard the cries of labor pains. And they were all blinded, respecting him, meaning Jesus, and they all knew regarding him, though they knew not whence he was. So, according to this account, Mary and Joseph were at home, and all of a sudden, the baby is not in Mary's womb anymore, and both Mary and Joseph see it, and people get various ideas about Jesus. Some recognize that Mary has had the child because he's there, but others are going, well, how does that work? Because we didn't hear any cries of labor and we didn't see a midwife go up. And so here in AD 67, maybe 4 years after the Gospel of Matthew was written, we have an account of Jesus having a miraculous birth. So these miraculous birth traditions go back startlingly early in church history.
So just to be clear, this wouldn't be trustworthy in the way that Scripture is trustworthy, but it points to a tradition that existed that Mary had not given. I see what you're saying. Okay,
right. This is not divinely inspired, but it does show the traditions about Jesus' birth that were floating around in the mid-1st century.
So this is not a late, it's not an invention of the medieval theologians or something. This is a long popular tradition of the church.
Yeah.
Nancy Joe, thanks for getting us started. I think we'll take a quick break right now, and we'll come back with more of our weird Christmas weird questions with Jimmy Akin right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Cy Kellett. Don't forget to check out the latest episode of our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus. You can listen each week to the world's premier podcast on Catholic apologetics at CatholicAnswersFocus.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Catholic Answers Focus, now available at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
EWTN is now on Twitter. Get short, timely messages from EWTN on your computer or cell phone. It's easy to stay up to date on a wide variety of topics. Pro-life news, Vatican announcements, catechesis, apologetics, the latest EWTN programming, and more. You can link to EWTN on Twitter from our homepage or go to twitter.com/EWTN. At work, at home, at school, and on the road. Stay connected to your world with EWTN's Twitter page.
I can't find my Christmas hat, but I'd be wearing it if I could find it because it's the Christmas season, and so Merry Christmas. We Catholics get to say Merry Christmas for a long time, so Merry Christmas to you. I hope that your Christmas is going very well. It's been a weird year, but still can hope for and pray for a Merry and Happy Christmas for you and your family. Jimmy Akin is our guest. Jimmy is the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. The senior apologist here at Catholic Answers and the author of a whole lot of books, including A Daily Defense, 365 Days Plus One to Becoming a Better Apologist. And a new year is almost upon us. If you want to start it and just read one a year, they're a page. They're one page. Little explanations of, or maybe a better way to say it is kind of refutations of certain objections against the Catholic faith, or in some cases explanations of the faith. And you read one a day, you're very well versed in apologetics by the end of the year. Jimmy, more questions, more weird questions for you, more weird Christmas questions. This one comes from Joe. What constitutes a Christmas movie? AKA, is Die Hard a Christmas movie?
So St. Thomas Aquinas likes to distinguish between different possible uses of terms, and I think we can do that here. You could use the term Christmas movie in at least three different broad senses that I can think of. The first one would be a movie that depicts the actual events of Christmas. So, and I'm going to, by the way, include Christmas TV shows here too, because the same thing happens on TV as in the movies. But you could think of this category, which actually depicts the original Christmas, as a biblical Christmas movie. So this is a Christmas movie in the fullest sense because it depicts the original Christmas. Examples of this would include The Nativity Story, which was a theatrical movie, or something like the Rankin Bass Christmas special on television, The Little Drummer Boy, because both of those involve the actual original Christmas. Second to that, a little more removed, you could have movies where the celebration of Christmas plays a large part in the story. It's not simply the backdrop to the story, but actually it's heavily involved in the story. Examples would include the movie A Christmas Story, the famous one where the little boy wants to get the Red Ryder BB gun. The Christmas special Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, another Rankin Bass animated special, or the Charlie Brown animated special, or the movie Santa Claus Conquers the Martians with Pia Zadora. So those would be kind of second-order Christmas movies.
Group.
Yeah. Well, Christmas plays a large part in the story of all of those. Okay. Then there are movies where Christmas is involved in the movie, but not the main plot. These movies often occur at Christmas time. They've got some Christmas elements in them, but it's not really what's driving the story. And so these would be third-order Christmas movies. And this is where Die Hard would go, the movie that Joe asked about. Die Hard is an action-adventure movie that just happens to take place at Christmas. The main character is like trying to get home for Christmas. But other than that, it doesn't play a big part in the action and what's driving the plot. Another television show that would fall into this category would be the Doctor Who Christmas special, The Return of Dr. Mysterio, which is actually a superhero story, but it just happens to occur at Christmas time.
All right, Joe, I'm really glad you asked that question. I got to ask my own follow-up, Jimmy. In the world of Star Trek, the second most important world, perhaps after the real world, is there ever a Christmas movie? I mean, a Christmas episode? I don't believe there is.
No, but there is an episode that refers to Thanksgiving. In Star Trek, the original series, the episode Charlie X, Captain Kirk is overheard giving directions to have the ship's cook make sure that the turkey servings are ready for Thanksgiving.
There was, and this goes in the favor of those people who prefer Star Wars to Star Trek, there was a Star Wars Christmas special. It's famous, perhaps infamous.
Technically, it wasn't a Christmas special. Is a holiday special, and it was actually released at Thanksgiving, and it involves the celebration of the Wookiee holiday known as Life Day.
Okay, very good. Which is that's a good little if you're gonna secularize it for a science fiction movie, that's a good substitute. Life Day.
Well, it did occur a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So.
I forgot that. Right. Thank you for allowing me that momentary jaunt into the world of Star Trek and Star Wars. Penelope has a question for you, Jimmy. I'm so glad Penelope asked this question. When does Christmas end? I shouldn't read it in an exasperated voice, Penelope. I apologize. When does Christmas end? The 26th? New Year's? After the octave? 12th night? The Epiphany? The presentation?
The answer is more complicated than you might think. I mean, we often hear about the 12 days of Christmas, and people assume that it's 12 days long. Actually, not the way, not in the Latin Rite, not today, not the way the general norms for the liturgical year and the calendar are written. That's the document that governs when seasons occur and how long they happen for. So, according to Section 33 of the general norms of the liturgical year and the calendar, the Christmas season runs from evening prayer 1 of Christmas until the Sunday after Epiphany or the Sunday after January 6th, inclusive of that Sunday. So you got to figure out which comes later. Is it the Sunday after Epiphany or the Sunday after January 6th? And that means you need to look at when Epiphany occurs. So we go down to Section 37 of the General Norms, and it says Epiphany is celebrated on January 6th unless, where it is not observed as a holy day of obligation, it has been assigned to the Sunday occurring between January 2nd and January 8th. And that's the case in the United States. In the United States, we don't have Epiphany as a separate holy day of obligation that can occur on any day of the week. Instead, in the Latin Rite in the United States, Epiphany is assigned to the Sunday between January 2nd and 8th. So, and by the way, the Sunday falling after January 6th is the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord. Now, in 2021, so this is when it's coming up, the Sunday that falls between the 2nd and the 8th is on January 3rd, which is before January 6th. And that means that in 2021, January 6th, since it falls later, is the triggering date for the end of Christmas. And as we heard, Christmas will end the Sunday after January 6th, which is the baptism of the Lord. And that's going to be January 10th. So this year, the Christmas season will end on January 10th. It'll vary from year to year in the United States, but this coming year, it's going to end on January 10th, giving us a total of 17 days of Christmas.
All right, 17 days. We'll have to add something to the Lords of Leaping. Maybe come up with something. Maybe I got nothing. For it. Thanks, Penelope, for that question. It's weird Christmas questions with Jimmy Akin today on Catholic Answers Live as we celebrate no matter how many days, whether it's 12 or 17. We're definitely in the Christmas season right now, and so we celebrate that season by having a little fun, asking Jimmy weird questions. These all came from listeners who submitted them to us various means. Paula asks this, Jimmy, is there any record anywhere of the midwives, if any, who attended Mary?
So in the document we heard from before, the Ascension of Isaiah from the mid-1st century, it was mentioned that there were no midwives. Nobody heard any midwives go up to her. There's another account in a document that comes from the mid-2nd century. So this is about 100 years later. It's a document sometimes it's called the Proto-Evangelium of James. It's also called the Infancy Gospel of James. And if you read chapters 18 and 19 of the Infancy Gospel, we find this. And this is Joseph. Joseph and Mary are on their way to Bethlehem. And he found a cave there and led her into it, and leaving his 2 sons beside her, because according to this account, Joseph was an elderly widower that already had sons by his previous wife who had died. And leaving his 2 sons beside her, he went out to seek a midwife in the district of Bethlehem. And now we shift into Joseph's voice. And I, Joseph, was walking and was not walking. And I looked up into the sky and saw the sky astonished. And I looked up to the pole of the heavens and saw it standing, and the birds of the air keeping still. So everything is frozen. And I looked down upon the earth, and I saw a trough lying, and work people reclining, and their hands were in the trough, and those that were eating did not eat, and those that were raising did not carry it up, and those that were conveying anything to their mouths did not convey it. But the faces of all were looking upward. And I saw the sheep walking, and the sheep stood still, and the shepherd raised his hand to strike them, and his hand remained up. And I saw the current of the river, and I saw the mouths of the kids resting upon the water and not drinking. And all things in a moment were driven from their course. So Joseph's out looking for a midwife, and it's like the whole world suddenly freezes to commemorate the birth of Christ. And I saw a woman coming down from the hill country, and she said to me, "O man, whither art thou going?" And I said, "I am seeking an Hebrew midwife." And she answered and said unto me, "Art thou of Israel?" And I said to her, "Yes." And she said, "And who is it that is bringing forth in the cave?" And I said, "A woman betrothed to me." And she said to me, "Is it not thy wife?" And I said to her, "It is Mary that was reared in the temple of the Lord, and I obtained her by lot as my wife, yet she is not my wife, but has conceived of the Holy Spirit." This was to preserve Mary as a consecrated virgin. And the midwife said to him, "Is this true?" And Joseph said to her, "Come and see." And the midwife went away with him, and they stood in the place of the cave, and behold, a luminous cloud overshadowed the cave. And the midwife said, "My soul has been magnified this day, because mine eyes have seen strange things, because salvation has been brought forth in Israel." And immediately the cloud disappeared out of the cave, and a great light shone in the cave, so that the eyes could not bear it. And in a little that light gradually decreased until the infant appeared, and went and took the breast of his mother Mary. And the midwife cried out and said, "This is a great day to me, because I have seen this strange sight." And the midwife went forth out of the cave, and Salome met her. And she said to her, "Salome, Salome, I've seen a strange sight to relate to thee. A virgin has brought forth a thing that her nature admits not of." So according to this account from the mid-2nd century, Joseph went out and he found a midwife and tried to bring her back to the cave. And Jesus emerged miraculously from Mary's womb, apparently with a great light, and she didn't need a midwife, although Joseph sought one out. And so that could suggest that maybe Mary had some preliminary birth pains, triggering Joseph to go get the midwife, but then there was this miraculous delivery. And, this document being 2nd century and being non-biblical, it's not inspired, it's not fully reliable, but it can contain some traditions that could be genuine.
Wow. And so, and we started off with a similar question. So this was the other document you were referring to at the beginning of the show that we would get around to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's amazing. The description is like almost like a Twilight Zone where the world just freezes. I can't remember the episode, but the world freezes and but a person is still moving through it. Is that the impression that you got reading that the Earth had just frozen?
It seems like everything just stops for a second to commemorate the birth of the Son of God.
Wow! And then, so so then a light is shining. So the baby is already born. Is that the idea that by the time, did I miss it here?
One could read it. One could read it different ways. The precise timing is not made clear, but we do have these two miraculous phenomena: the time stop and the great light.
It's just so much fun to hear those ancient words of popular Christian piety. It's not the Bible, but it's our brothers and sisters who wrote those things, and it's beautiful to hear it. Jimmy Akin is our guest. We're doing weird Christmas questions with Jimmy this hour and next. Join us for more of that right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
We'll be right back with more great answers on Catholic Answers Live.
How can the Eucharist truly be Christ's body? Does belief in the real presence mean that Catholics are cannibals? Do the Bible and early Christians support Catholic teaching on the Eucharist? In 20 Answers, the Eucharist, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, helping you deepen your own appreciation for this most precious sign of Christ's enduring presence in the world. 20 Answers, the Eucharist is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com today and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
If you spend any time on Twitter, Facebook, or mainstream media, you're probably familiar with the litany of slogans that skeptics employ to rescue you from the foolish belief that God exists. The constant onslaught seems to leave people with the idea that they have no alternative but to embrace atheism. How can a Christian respond? In One Less God Than You, John DeRosa breaks down 20 of the most common atheist challenges and shows you how to craft effective answers. Atheism is more aggressive and widespread than ever. Read One Less God Than You and prepare yourself to respond with the joyful truth that God is real. To get your copy of One Less God Than You, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Killett, your host. Merry Christmas to you and to all who are with you. Thanks for joining us. We're very grateful that you joined us during this Christmas season. And we're doing some weird questions, but they're Christmas-themed weird questions with Jimmy Akin, senior apologist at Catholic Answers and the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Jimmy Jason writes this: if other planets were colonized and we had to create a whole new calendar, how would we adjust Christmas?
Well, as long as we're confined to the solar system, I don't think we would create a new calendar. The solar system is only like, I mean, it depends on how you define it, but like Pluto is only like six light hours away. And so as long as we're here in the solar system, I think any planets or moons or space stations we colonize are going to continue to use the Gregorian calendar. Now, what that would mean, because we're all in such tight communication with each other.
Right.
Now, what that would mean in terms of Christmas is we'd celebrate it on December 25th, universal Earth time, but it would happen at different places in the orbits of the other planets. So, for example, Mars has a year that's 187 Earth days long, And so that's not quite 2 years. It's almost 2 years, but not quite. And so every time December 25th comes around, people on Mars would celebrate Christmas. And they may be doing this, in less than 10 years, because Elon Musk wants to have humans on Mars in less than 10 years. So on December 25th, they would celebrate it regardless of where they are in the Martian orbit. And what that would mean is that on most years on Mars, you'd actually have 2 Christmases per Martian year. But sometimes you'd only have 1 Christmas per Martian year. Jupiter, on the other hand, the next planet out from Mars, has an orbit of like 12 Earth years. And so you'd have 12 Christmases per Jovian year. And it gets further the more you go out. On the other hand, if you go the other direction, you go towards the sun, the orbits of the planets, the length of their orbits is shorter. So Mercury orbits, every 2-3 months. And so you would have the opposite effect. You would have a Christmas only every few Mercury years. You wouldn't have a Christmas every Mercury year. Now, what happens if we go even further out than the solar system and we colonize distant locations that aren't in regular communication with Earth? Then it might vary. But it would vary. You might have Christmases calibrated to the local year, so they're not celebrating at the same time Earth is. But I think that's rather improbable. I think if we have the technology to get to these other places, then we're going to have the ability to keep track of time well enough that we'll know when Christmas is on Earth. And since Jesus was born on Earth, there's going to be a strong tendency to want to celebrate his birth in conjunction with its celebration on Earth, regardless of what the local year is like. And precedent would be set for that by our colonies here in the solar system. So if we start colonizing Alpha Centauri or Betelgeuse or places like that even further away, the precedent will already have been set of planets other than Earth celebrating Christmas in time with Earth.
Well, first of all, thank you for saying Betelgeuse only once. Okay, so the thing I have to say underlying Jason's question is the confidence that Christians will be heading out. Or maybe he just feels that Christmas is kind of a social thing now. But I share Jason's confidence that Christians will be among those who go wherever humans go.
Oh, yeah, and missionaries and pastoral care for the settlers and all kinds of stuff.
Right. Jason, thanks for the question. Esther's next. Esther asks this, Jimmy: how did the character of Santa Claus evolve, and what is his historical connection, if any, to St. Nicholas?
Okay, so the original St. Nicholas is a figure that we don't really know a huge amount about. His traditional dates are from 270 AD, or I should say AD 270, to AD 343. So he apparently lived in the latter half of the first century, the latter half of the 3rd century, and the first half of the 4th century. We don't know a lot about him. He would have lived through the Decian persecution, which was the final major persecution of the church, and then he would have been alive when Christianity was legalized by the Edict of Toleration that the Emperor Constantine issued, and he would have been alive at the time of the First Council of Nicaea that defined the divinity of Christ in AD 325. He apparently was bishop in Myra, which is in Turkey today. It's on the southern coast of Turkey. It's a maritime port. And there are various legends about him. It is reported fairly early that he attended the Council of Nicaea, which could be plausible because it was held in Turkey. That's where Nicaea is. It's near Constantinople. So he could easily have attended. On the other hand, the acts we have from the First Council of Nicaea don't mention him, so it's not certain. A legend is that he slapped the heretic Arius at the council. but that's a legend. We don't really know that that happened. Also, another legend is that he was very generous and provided dowries in a kind of secretive manner for 3 young women whose father had become impoverished and couldn't provide them with dowries. So St. Nicholas secretly provided these dowries so they could get married. And that secret gift giving later became, even though that's also a legend, we don't know that that really happened, but that legend then developed into the Santa Claus comes to your house and secretly gives gifts at night on Christmas legend. And it happened in stages. As the Christian faith spread through Europe, St. Nicholas was remembered in various ways in various languages around Europe. In the Netherlands or Holland, he was remembered as Sinterklaas. And you can hear how Sinterklaas sounds like St. Nicholas. Well, Sinterklaas then evolved into Santa Claus. And so that's where we get the name Santa Claus. It's just St. Nicholas brought into English through Dutch. In the 1400s, we started having Christmas in England personified as Sir Christmas. So they had a personification of Christmas, kind of like in A Christmas Carol, you have the Ghost of Christmas Past, for example. He's a personification of Christmas. Well, they had a similar concept back in the 1400s in England where they would personify Christmas as a man known as Sir Christmas. And by the 1500s, after the Reformation, he became known as Father Christmas. And eventually, Father Christmas and Sinterklaas, or Santa Claus, sort of merged. So today, in England, the Santa Claus figure is known as Father Christmas, but he basically functions a lot like Santa Claus. The name Santa Claus in English is attested around 1773 in the American colonies. And so this was just before the American Revolution. And the colony of New York had been founded or had a lot of people who were from Holland. And so they brought their Sinterklaas tradition with them. In fact, New York City used to be known as New Amsterdam. And consequently, there was a heavy influence of Dutch culture, and that shaped the image of Santa Claus in the American colonies, and specifically around New York. So that's where we got the Santa Claus depicted as this bearded, pipe-smoking, jolly fellow like a Dutch sailor.
Oh,
yeah.
He looks
so
like
they're
a Dutch
borrowing.
sailor. Okay.
They're borrowing, and originally had a kind of green cloak, but they're borrowing on elements of Dutch culture to depict the original version of the modern Santa Claus. Mm-hmm. Then Santa Claus became the sort of canonical image of Santa Claus around 1823, when an anonymous man at the time published a poem called A Visit from St. Nicholas, which is better known today as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, after its first line. And that poem involved him having, a sleigh to deliver the presents being pulled by 8 tiny reindeer. And eventually the author of this poem was outed, and his name was Clement Clark Moore. But originally he published it anonymously. But that poem then became the definitive American portrayal of Santa Claus. In the 20th century, Gene Autry added Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer in a novelty song. And by the way, reindeer are otherwise known as caribou. So if you want to know what a reindeer looks like, think caribou.
12 tiny caribou doesn't sound as good, though. I don't know. Maybe it's just what I'm used to.
Mm-hmm.
That is a fascinating history of Santa Claus.
Yeah, that's how it all developed.
Wow. And so I didn't realize that the poem was so influential, but that's 1823. So would have had the whole 19th century then to kind of build up that tradition before the kind of the advent of the mass media age.
Yeah.
All right. Very interesting. Esther, thank you for asking that question. All right. that was a pretty weird question, but now we have someone in the true spirit of weird questions for Jimmy Akin. Joe asks, might Santa be a Time Lord?
I'll answer this question. I want to relate it to another question that we have coming up. And so since it's break time, why don't we take the break and then we'll come back and answer those questions together.
All right, thanks, Jimmy. We'll take a quick break on this Christmas edition. As a matter of fact, it's a little bit weird. It's weird Christmas questions for Jimmy Akin on Catholic Answers Live. We'll get to whether or not it's possible for Santa to be a Time Lord right after this with Jimmy.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
Do you want to end abortion, halt the attack on traditional marriage, and ensure religious freedom for ourselves and for our grandchildren? To do this, we must convert the culture. St. Paul's Street Evangelization is a grassroots initiative that recognizes this need and takes it to the streets. If you're interested in peacefully sharing the gospel in your area, visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
EWTN, teaching the truth.
I love listening to Catholic radio. It's perfect. It provides peace and it builds us up and strengthens us. We listen to it whenever we're in the car. My husband and I love it. He got me started with it before he even became a Catholic. He owns his own business, and so he's working by himself, and he listens to Catholic radio, and he's called in several times too. It's using the technology that we have for good.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live, doing all Christmas questions today with Jimmy Akin, but they're weird I cannot say weird Christmas questions. It comes out weird.
You keep wanting to talk about cereals like Quisp.
Oh, yeah. Quisp and Quake. I forgot about Quisp and Quake. All right, let me just stop then. It's weird Christmas questions with Jimmy Akin, and the next question we've already asked, but I'll repeat it again for Jimmy. Might Santa be a Time Lord? That comes from Joe. Might Santa be a Time Lord?
Okay, and I wanted to relate that to the next question, or set of questions, which is asked by Robert. So could you read those?
Oh, okay. So then Robert asks this. It's a multi-part question. 1, would Santa need to travel faster than light speed to deliver gifts to all nice Christians on Christmas Eve? If so, could that explain his longevity and his increase in mass over the centuries? That's a good question. Part 2 of Robert's very complex question. Does he use shrinking technology to fit through chimneys, teleportation technology to beam into houses, or some sort of quantum phase technology to render himself and his bag of presents temporarily insubstantial to pass through walls? And part 3 from Robert, could he use said technology to conquer the Martians? All right, that is some good weird question stuff.
So let's unpack this. So the first question we need to figure out is, how many people does Santa need to deliver presents to? And although Robert mentions Christians in general, it's really children that Santa is most famous for delivering presents to. And there are about 2.2 billion children on Earth right now. Now, Santa Claus, not all of those families celebrate Christmas. So, like in the Muslim world, they're not doing the Christmas presents thing in many cases. So it's not all of those 2.2 billion children are going to get presents, but Santa Claus is not going to restrict it to Christians, because obviously he wants to evangelize, and so he'll deliver Christians to any household that's willing to celebrate Christmas.
All right.
And thus show Christian generosity. So even if it's a non-Christian household, he'll deliver presents there. But we'll just use 2.2 billion as a starting figure for how many children need to receive presents. Now, something I realized very early on, back when I myself was a child, although I didn't really believe in Santa Claus at this point, I realized that Santa Claus could maximize the amount of time that he has to deliver presents if he starts at the international date line and flies clockwise around Earth. Because the Earth rotates counterclockwise on its axis. And if you therefore start at the international date line and go backwards around the Earth clockwise, you will maximize the amount of time you have by traveling against the rotation of the Earth. So the Earth turns in every 24 hours, but if you're flying against that, you can effectively get 48 hours to deliver those presents.
He would clearly do that. I mean, that's all right.
And
48 hours you got.
If you assume you've got 48 hours to deliver presents and you've got 2.2 billion children to deliver them to, that turns into about, depending on the number of children in the household, between Santa needing to visit 4,000 and 6,000 homes every second.
Yeah.
Now, 4,000 and 6,000 homes every second would not require light speed. You could get there without light speed, and thus you don't need superluminal travel to do all these deliveries. But you will be traveling an appreciable fraction of the speed of light. And that would not explain Santa's longevity or his increase in mass over the centuries, which is one of the things Robert asked about. The reason is that if you are traveling relativistically, you have to get very close to the speed of light to have significant time dilation and for time to slow down significantly for you. And consequently, because it's the time that's slowing down, that's actually going to impede you from delivering those presents in a rapid manner. Because you're going to be moving slower if you're traveling a high fraction of the speed of light.
Right.
And so that wouldn't explain Santa's longevity, because he's simply he would be aging at a slower rate, but he also would be delivering presents at a slower rate. When it comes to mass, it's true that relativistic mass increases as you get close to the speed of light, but not physical mass. And he's depicted as having physical mass. Yeah. You know, he's got the big belly that shakes like a bowl of jelly or whatever. And that's not relativistic mass, that's physical mass, and it's only relativistic mass that increases if you're traveling at a high percentage of light speed.
Okay.
Also, there's a problem if he's traveling a high percentage of light speed, which is all the relativistic mass he's acquiring is going to wreak havoc on Earth. Because that having something with a high relativistic mass zipping around Earth is going to be having all kinds of horrendous effects. And that leads us to another hypothesis, which is he's not using either he's not traveling at he's got something else going on besides just the natural things that you would expect. He's got some kind of more advanced technology than merely being able to move at relativistic speeds. One thing that could be happening is he could have some kind of mass dampener. And if he's got a way to decrease his mass, then that will make it easier for him to travel at high velocities. And it also means he won't be wreaking havoc on the environment by traveling at high velocities. But we have these other considerations too, like how does he fit all of the presents? I mean, number one, how does he get into closed small spaces? And I remember an account from childhood where he would shrink in order to go through like a flue pipe instead of a house that doesn't have a full chimney. But he's also got to get the presents around with him. He's got to keep them in that sleigh. And how does he have enough presents for 2.2 billion children in that sleigh in his bags? It would seem that the bags might be bigger on the inside than the outside. And there is a race that is known for having technology that is bigger on the inside than the outside, and that can travel through space and time non-disruptively and get into small places with no obvious access. And that could indeed suggest that Santa Claus is a Time Lord, or at least has Time Lord technology. In fact, Santa Claus appeared in a Doctor Who special a couple of years ago, played by Nick Frost, in which he did have bags that were bigger on the inside than the outside. And it was also a hybrid Santa Claus, Ridley Scott alien facehugger episode. In terms of the final part of Robert's question, could he use this technology to conquer the Martians? Well, as the Daleks have concluded, the TARDIS is a weapon. So he could use it to conquer the Martians, especially the Ice Warriors, but he doesn't need to, because according to the 1964 movie Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, Santa Claus conquered the Martians simply with the spirit of Christmas.
Good old Santa. Thanks. I appreciate those questions, Robert and Joe. That was I had never thought about that, Santa moving through the atmosphere in the proximity of houses would basically just explode the houses if you were. So that would ruin Christmas. Let's go to Tony. Tony's question, Jimmy, I know the so-called secret meaning of the 12 days of Christmas and what they are purported to symbolize, but what about the number of days themselves? I was told that if you add up all the days mentioned in each verse, you get each verse that you get on a gift for every day of the year until Christmas. Is that true? Oh, I see. So if you add it all up, then you get a gift a day. All right.
Okay. So there are a couple things here. The first one, we should address the so-called secret meaning of the 12 days of Christmas. Some folks will be familiar with that. Some folks won't. The idea is that the lyrics to the song The 12 Days of Christmas are a kind of crypto-catechism to teach the Catholic faith during the age of persecution, when English Catholics were persecuted by the Protestant authorities and couldn't openly practice their faith. So each item in the 12 Days of Christmas is supposed to correspond to something connected with the Christian faith. Like the partridge in the pear tree is supposed to be an image of Jesus on the cross. And they go through all of the different elements, and like the 10 Lords a Leaping or the 10 Commandments and things like that. So this is all nonsense. This is a pious legend that has no historical basis, and it really doesn't make sense, because if you wouldn't need this song to teach the faith. You have to know the faith first before you can relate it to the elements of the song. So you'd have to broadcast the faith in plain text anyway to the children in your homes before any of this would make sense to them. And if they already know the faith, you don't need the song. So this really is not supported by the historical evidence. It's just a fanciful Christmas song about one person giving gifts to another. Having said that,
Jimmy, the English weren't suppressing knowledge of Jesus on the cross or the 10 Commandments either. That had nothing to. You could talk about that openly.
Those elements you could. Yeah. Having said that, about the number of the gifts, well, you don't really get one per day because you get them during the 12 days of Christmas. But how many would you get if they were stretched out over the course of a year? I actually was thinking about this last year at Christmas Eve service, where a priest was going through the lyrics of the song, and I started thinking about the mathematics of it, and I realized the equation I needed to run was 1 times 12 for the 12 partridges in a pear tree I get, followed by 2 times 11 for the 2 turtle doves I get on the next 11 days, followed by 3 times 10 for the 3 French hens I get on the final 10 days, and so forth. And so I ran the calculation. It turns out if you count a partridge in a pear tree as one thing, you get 364 gifts. So that's just 1 or 2 short of 1 gift per day for a whole year. but they're bunched up in the 12 days of Christmas. I did a blog post on this where I talked about the mathematics of this, and I show you graphs and bar charts. And also there's what's known as the Christmas price index that calculates the amount you'd have to pay to actually give these gifts. And this year it's around $100,000. So that's true love.
Jimmy Akin is our guest. We're going to continue with weird Christmas questions with Jimmy. Go ahead.
Google mathematics of the 12 days of Christmas, Jimmy Akin, and that blog post will come up.
All right, more weird questions about Christmas for Jimmy Akin when we come back right after this on Catholic Answers Live. Merry Christmas and welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host, having a very Merry Christmas. Hope you are having a very Merry Christmas. The Christmas season continues, and it just wouldn't be Christmas here at Catholic Answers without some weird Christmas questions for Jimmy Akin. One of the great innovations of the last couple of years is doing our Weird Questions with Jimmy episode. People are always sending in weird questions. In this case, we asked specifically for weird questions that had to do with Christmas, and boy, did we get a whole bunch of them. If you're just joining us and you have never heard of Catholic Answers before, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm glad you got a day off and you got to listen, and invite you to listen again. We put it up as a podcast. You can listen at any time during the day or night. And you can find out about us at Catholic.com. Just visit Catholic.com. You find out all about what we do at Catholic Answers. But I can tell you in one sentence what we do. We explain and defend the Catholic faith. And that is what Jimmy has devoted his life to doing. He has spent his adult life as a Catholic apologist. I mean, he was also a store detective at one time, and he was a cook in a Chinese restaurant. So Jimmy has lived. But he has devoted the great bulk of his adult years to explaining and defending the Catholic faith right here at Catholic Answers. You can find him at JimmyAkin.com, and you can find his podcast, Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, lurking all over the internet. Thanks for being back for another hour, Jimmy.
Hey, my pleasure.
You ready for some more Christmas weirdness?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, several in a row here. They are in the spirit. Let's start with Josh. Is it possible that the Star of Bethlehem was a UFO?
Depends on what you mean by possible. Now, this, believe it or not, is something that has actually been proposed. There have been people in the UFO movement who have claimed contact with aliens back in the 1950s, and to some extent in the 1960s. There was a movement of people known as contactees who claimed that they had been visited by and were in communication with extraterrestrials. The most famous of them was a man named George Adamski. But the contactee movement kind of faded. The claims that they made didn't end up being easily borne out by the science we later discovered, because the contactees would say things like they had been taken to other planets here in the solar system, and they were native to planets like Mars and Venus and places like that. And subsequent science revealed, no, we don't see any big civilizations on these other planets. So the contactee movement kind of faded, although there are still some individuals that persisted, like over in Europe, there was a gentleman named Billy Meyer who claimed to be in contact with extraterrestrials. And some of these contactees would mix in elements of the Christian faith with what the aliens were telling them. So Billy Meyer definitely does that. George Adamski did that. Some of the others would do that. They talk about how the space aliens are like fellow Christians. They're our space brothers, and they believe in Jesus and things like that. Sometimes they'd weave Jesus into their mythology in a tighter way, and you would have proposals. And even today, you still sometimes have proposals that the Star of Bethlehem was a UFO or a flying saucer or what have you. Now, in terms of is it possible that it was an extraterrestrial vehicle or drone or something like that? Is it logically possible that God could have used such a means to guide the Magi to Jesus? Well, it doesn't involve a contradiction in the terms involved. It's not like a square circle or a four-sided triangle. So it's logically possible, but that doesn't mean it's possible given the evidence, or that it's evidentially possible. The only evidence that really can be brought forth from the biblical text that could support this is the idea that some people perceive that the star moved in a way that led the Magi to Bethlehem and then stopped over the house where Jesus was. And this is a common reading, and it's a possible reading, and you do have people who will say, well, the star couldn't have been a natural object because natural stars don't move in that way. They don't move around in the sky during the course of a single night in such a way to lead people to a location and then stop over that location. That's actually and so maybe the star was something else, like an angel or a supernatural manifestation or a UFO. And even if it wouldn't be an alien spaceship, it would technically fit the definition of an unidentified flying object. We don't know what else it is. But I don't buy any of that. I've done a detailed study of this, and if you carefully look at the text in Matthew that describes this, it does not indicate that the Star of Bethlehem moved in an unusual way. All it really says is that when the wise men were on the road to Bethlehem, they saw the star in front of them. So since Bethlehem is to the south of Jerusalem, the star was in the southern sky. That's all it means. The star was in the southern sky in front of them. And then when they got to the house where the baby was, the star happened to be above the house from the perspective they were looking at it at. So, if you're traveling south and you see the star in the southern sky and you encounter this house and you're looking south, you're going to see the star above it. So that's really all that the text requires. It doesn't require any special motion. And once you realize that, it becomes much more fathomable what the star was. We know a good bit about how ancient astrology worked. In particular, since these guys came from the East, you want to look at how Babylonian astrology worked. And based on various considerations, it looks like the star was Jupiter. Jupiter was the king planet. It was associated with kings, both in classical Greco-Roman astrology and in Babylonian astrology. And when Jupiter came into conjunction with certain other astronomical features, it had special meanings that could signal the birth of a great king in Israel. And there's a fascinating book I was reading about Babylonian astrology that makes this very point. So I think the Star of Bethlehem was Jupiter seen in particular alignments. We really don't have evidence that it was a UFO. One of the things I talk about on Mysterious World is every phenomenon needs to be taken at face value until you get evidence to the contrary. So if your wife serves you a meal and you can infer, oh, she's just serving me a meal. She's not secretly trying to poison me. But if you discover you're in an episode of Columbo that you have evidence she's trying to murder you, well, then that could overcome the initial appearance that she's just serving you a meal. The same thing applies in other areas. Sometimes Christians are too quick to leap to demons as an interpretation of phenomena. They'll say, oh, here's this unusual phenomenon we don't understand. It must be demons. Well, does it present itself as demons? Sometimes you'll have Christians saying aliens must be demons. Well, but they don't present themselves as demons. They present themselves, at least according to the common narratives, as people who are traveling around in ships. And you would want to assume if you meet an alien that it's traveling around in a ship, it's a natural being until you get evidence of demons. The flip side is also true. Sometimes UFO people interpret unusual phenomena in terms of aliens when there's really no evidence of aliens. And that's what's happening here. Jesus did not say, oh, guess what? I'm from another planet and I want to tell you about the Galactic Space Brotherhood that you can join. He said, I'm from heaven and this is supernatural, and I'm going to tell you how to be with God in the afterlife, not joining some federation in this life. So it is a mistake to take the biblical phenomena and say, oh, we should explain it by aliens when there's no actual evidence of aliens. The phenomena should be taken at face value until you have evidence otherwise. And the evidence we have is that this is a supernatural phenomenon in terms of Jesus's overall ministry. And we shouldn't leap to aliens as the explanation for it.
Josh, thank you so much for that question. Right in the exact spirit of weird Christmas questions. We appreciate it. And my Christmas wish for you, Josh, that you don't wake up in an episode of Columbo. We'll take a quick break and right back with more weird Christmas... I can't do it. Weird Christmas questions for Jimmy Akin right after this.
Stay with us for more Catholic Answers Live.
Hi, this is Cy Kellett. Don't forget to check out the latest episode of our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus. You can listen each week to the world's premier podcast on Catholic apologetics at CatholicAnswersFocus.com or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Catholic Answers Focus, now available at CatholicAnswersFocus.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Ever wonder how we should pray? I'd like to offer just one. Don't make prayer your work, make work your prayer. In other words, one's faithfulness to their daily duties of state and life and vocation, while at home and at their place of employment, can be offered as a pleasing sacrifice to God when done lovingly, faithfully, and well. It all boils down to the virtue of diligence, doesn't it? Do what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, in the way it's supposed to be done.
All right, I've been practicing at the break. Weird Christmas questions with Jimmy Akin this hour. Jimmy Akin, senior apologist at Catholic Answers, the proprietor of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, which is becoming a more and more popular part of the internet, one of the delights that the internet has made possible. You can find it just by searching Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. You'll find scores and scores of episodes on all kinds of different mysteries, both religious and secular. It's all religious here today. Because
more than six scores.
More than 6 scores.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was going to be math. All right. There was, carry the 2. That's a lot. It's all weird Christmas questions, however, this hour with Jimmy Akin. These have been submitted by our listeners who we much appreciate for doing so. Robert asks this, Jimmy, in the absence of any reference in the infancy narratives to time travelers asking to hold baby Jesus, is that evidence against the eventual invention of time travel? I can't be the only one who wants to hold baby Jesus.
I would say that it counts as weak evidence against the invention of time travel, but not particularly strong evidence. In fact, some people would even challenge whether it's evidence at all, because there's a famous saying in science, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So if you read the infancy narratives in Matthew and Luke, there is an absence of evidence of time travelers in those narratives. But that doesn't mean that you have evidence of the absence of time travel at any period in human history. And so there are alternative explanations that could account for the seeming absence of evidence in the infancy narratives. While it's true that lots of people would want to hold the baby Jesus, there are reasons why not many people would be able to. One of them is time travel might be prohibitively difficult. So, and it might happen, in fact, the way some proposed time machines work, and I'm not talking science fiction time machines, I'm talking actual physicist-based proposals for how time machines could work. You can't go farther back in time than the invention of the machine you're using. So you have to build the machine, and then you can use it to travel back, but not before the invention of that machine. So if you have a machine that's invented, say, in the year 2400, you could travel back to the year 2400, but you could not travel back to the year 2 BC, because that's before the invention of the machine. Oh. On the other hand, it could be that you can travel back before the invention of the machine, but in doing so, you have to use so much power that, or there are other adverse conditions that it's prohibitively too expensive to get back that far. I mean, maybe you could go back a year and it could at a reasonable cost, but just like you have to pay more to drive across the country than to drive across town, you might not have the resources you need to get back as far as 2,000 years in our past. Also, even if you say, well, no, it's actually feasible given the resources future people will have to get back that far, it could be that there is a prohibition on going back to this event. And that prohibition could come from a number of sources. It could come from God. In Arthur C. Clarke's novel 2010, The Year We Make Contact, humans are exploring the Jupiter system, the moons around Jupiter, and the aliens who left the monoliths give us permission to explore all of the worlds around Jupiter, but not the moon Europa, because there's something special going on Europa. There's a developing species there. And so the monolith aliens send us a message that says all these worlds are yours except Europa. Attempt no landings there. And if we invent time travel, God could send us a message and say all these times are yours, but not the life of my son. Attempt no landings there, because he doesn't want that interfered with. Or it could be a temporal prime directive. Humans could say, we don't really want our history being interfered with, and this is a key junction in the history of the world. So whatever travel we do in time, you're not allowed to go to critical points. And this is a critical point in world history, so don't go there. Then there's a final option that I'll mention in terms of the absence of evidence of time travelers in the infancy narratives. They hid themselves. If you're in the future and you really want to hold the baby Jesus, maybe you learn first century Palestinian Jewish Aramaic and you travel back to, say, the year 10 BC, and you infiltrate yourself into Judean society, and you buy some sheep, and you get a job as a shepherd in Bethlehem, and you wait for the night in 3 or 2 BC when the angels show up and say, this night a Savior is born unto thee, and you get to go over to Bethlehem with the other shepherds and hold the baby Jesus.
Thank you. You thought that was very systematic, even for your usual standards, Jimmy. That was a very systematic walk through that. Robert, thanks for that weird Christmas question. Jimmy, before I go to the next Christmas question, have you seen this thing on the internet where people look at old silent movies and they try to see evidence of time travel in this? They'll be they try to see if the person is using a cell phone in the background or something like that. It's kind of an entertaining little corner of the internet.
It has, and you can see interesting things. I actually put this on Facebook a while back. I was watching an episode of Columbo from the 1970s starring Dick Van Dyke as a photographer. And I'm going, what are those 2 iPad minis he's got on his desk? And it was pointed out that actually they're photographic plates. They're not iPad minis.
But it is funny. People puzzle them out together. What could this possibly be? And then it'll be some just like that. All right, Shane asks this question, and it had to be asked on weird Christmas questions for Jimmy Akin. So thank you, Shane, for doing the necessary task. Jimmy, what is the deal with Krampus?
So Krampus has begun to be popular in American culture in the last few years. It was not when I was growing up. We had never heard of Krampus, but it is starting to appear in cartoons and stuff like that. So for people who are not familiar, Krampus is a mythological or figure associated with Christmas in Central European folklore. You'll often hear Krampus associated with German culture, but it's really broader than that. You also get Krampus stories in northern Italy and Hungary and Croatia and the Czech Republic, so it's really Central European folklore. Krampus is commonly held to look like a kind of half man, half goat. So it's got horns and cloven hooves, but it's also a biped. And it's a sinister figure that punishes bad children at Christmas time. And so the Krampus legend we can show goes back to about the 1600s, so the 17th century. And that was around the same time that the Santa Claus figure was developing. And so essentially what Krampus is the anti-Santa Claus or the anti-Saint Nicholas, whereas Santa Claus comes to reward good children by bringing them presents. Krampus comes to punish bad children by scaring them and doing bad things to them. And so it brings a different aspect to the naughty or nice question. So just like parents would encourage children to be good with the prospect of getting presents if they're good, Central European parents would also warn children about bad things that could happen to them if they're not good. And that was then personified in the form of Krampus.
All right. I've never seen the movie, by the way. I'm scared to. Stephen asks this. I got time for this. Stephen asks this. Would it be morally wrong to invent a fictional character who delivers gifts on Christmas, then convince one's children that this fictional character exists?
So this is going to depend on your theory of lying. If you think that lying is wrong in absolutely all cases, then it would be wrong to convince your children that a fictional character exists in the real world. Now, that wouldn't stop you from being able to say, hey, there's this physical gift giver on Christmas that is just pretend, but it's fun to pretend, so we're going to play pretend about this fictional gift giver. But it would be wrong to convince them that the fictional gift giver is actually real. On the other hand, other people have different theories of lying. I have a friend who conjectured that it might not be wrong to lie to people who are not yet moral agents, like children below the age of reason. Because they aren't responsible for their moral decisions, and so you're not affecting them in that way. I didn't personally find that persuasive, but that is one theory. Another theory would hold that it's acceptable to lie to someone in order to achieve some greater good, like maybe saving Jewish lives is the classic example. You can lie to Nazis in order to save Jewish lives by saying there are no Jews in my attic. On the other hand, you could say, well, there's some greater good here, like the fun and wonder that the children are going to have by believing in this fictional gift giver. However, I personally am not a fan of the fictional gift giver hoax. So although I leave it up to individual parents to discern what the right thing to do is in their circumstance, I personally am not a fan of the fictional gift giver hoax that is common in our society. Although I'm not at all opposed to the let's pretend idea.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I guess the next question is it follows. It kind of follows logically from that, and that comes from Deb, and she says, "Does encouraging belief in Santa make children doubt their faith when they learn the truth?"
Not necessarily. The many people have believed in Santa when they were small, and that doesn't stop them from going on to be devout Christians as an adult. On the other hand, in a very tiny minority of cases, I could imagine that it could. Yeah. And what I think would be more common, though, is people who later on choose to reject their faith may use the Santa Claus hoax as a pretext and say, oh, well, it's Jesus is a hoax like Santa Claus, when really we have very good evidence for Jesus. But that won't stop them from using it as a pretext to justify their rejection of the faith. But it's really a decision they've made independently of Santa Claus. So I don't think there's a huge risk there. I think the vast majority of people, as they're able to learn to distinguish fiction from reality, they can contextualize, oh yeah, that was a game and my family played it, and that doesn't mean that we don't have good evidence about Jesus and that he is real and these things really did happen with him. So I can't exclude a loss of faith in this situation, but I don't think it's particularly common.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. That whole thing about lying and everything, I struggle with that because, and you probably have already reasoned this out, but like a surprise party, often you're deceptive. I mean, it is deceptive, but you're not meaning to do any harm. Have you reasoned that one out?
Yeah, I think, my personal view, and I know we've got to go to a break, my personal view is that lying is a form of cognitive damage, and there can be situations where you use cognitive damage for a positive effect, like the pain of getting a shot or a momentary deception to throw a surprise party that the person will really enjoy.
Okay, fair enough. That's interesting. Jimmy Akin, our guest, and weird questions is something we do with Jimmy, so it's Christmas time. How about some weird Christmas questions? That's what we're doing, and we'll continue with that right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live.
Where is a pope mentioned in the Bible? Why do we need a mere man to lead the church? Can't we all just follow Jesus? Did the early Christians recognize that Peter and his successors possessed special authority? In 20 Answers, the Papacy, you'll find smart, solid answers to these questions and many more, explaining in clear and friendly language how the papacy is not only biblical and historical, but essential for preserving Christian unity of belief. 20 Answers, the Papacy is part of the 20 Answers series from Catholic Answers, offering hard facts, powerful arguments, and clear explanations of the most important topics facing the Church and the world, all in a compact, easy-to-read package. Visit shop.catholic.com and take a look at this exciting new series from Catholic Answers Press.
Did you know you can access Catholic Answers Live right from your phone or other mobile device? Download the Catholic Answers Live app today. The Catholic Answers Live app, available now on iOS and Android.
Bishop Joseph Strickland of Tyler, Texas, is one of the most courageous leaders in the church, known for his outspoken support of unborn life, Orthodox faith and morals, and reforming Catholic institutions. In his groundbreaking new book, Light and Leaven, he offers a forthright perspective on the state of the church today and calls on the lay faithful to meet its challenges boldly. Touching on topics including parish renewal, the centrality of the Eucharist, the need for prayer and silence in a noisy and distracted age, and the battle between good and evil in the church and world, Bishop Strickland's wise insights and evident love for souls will inspire and edify you. To order your copy of Light and Leaven, visit shop.catholic.com today or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Welcome back to one of our Christmas editions, the Christmas season edition of Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. Jimmy Akin is our guest this hour, and we're doing weird Christmas questions, which listeners have been kind enough to send in to us so that Jimmy, we could do what we do with Jimmy, which is ask him weird questions, which he has a freakish ability to answer. You might discover that if you... A lot of people would be like, I don't know. But Jimmy's usually got some take on these that's very helpful and interesting. Let's go to, I was going to mention Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World is where he does this in a more extended way. Take a longer look at a particular mystery with Jimmy at Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Amanda asks this: if you live on one of Jupiter's moons... It's possible that he does, Amanda. I appreciate that you asking him that. If you live on one of...
Except Europa. Attempt no landing.
You can't go to Europa. Exactly. Unless you want to deal with those monolith people. If you live on one of Jupiter's moons, how do you know which Earth time zone to observe in order to know when to hold midnight mass on Christmas Eve? Thank you, Amanda. Excellent weird Christmas question.
So there are a number of possibilities that one might consider. One, and this applies not just to living on the moons of Jupiter, but like if you're in a spacecraft orbiting the Earth or a space station orbiting the Earth, what time do you keep? One possibility would be the time of the point of origin. So if you launched from Cape Canaveral in Florida, you might be using Pacific time, which is the time in Florida. On the other hand, you might use the capital of the nation that you launched from. So if you launch from Siberia, you might use Moscow time. Another possibility, if you're having a religious observance and you're Catholic, you might say, well, we're going to have midnight mass Rome time. Mm-hmm. Or you might say, well, Jesus was born in Bethlehem, so we'll have midnight mass at midnight Bethlehem time. All of those would be possibilities, but they're not what likely would happen, because we've already cracked this question. We've already established a precedent, I should say. When you go into Earth orbit, and we've been doing that since the 1950s, you travel through all of Earth's time zones, and you need to be in communication with different places on Earth that are in different time zones, depending on which radio receivers on Earth are turned toward you so you can pick them up. Because the Earth blocks radio waves, and so you can't, if you launch from Florida and Florida's on the other side of the world, there's no way to talk directly to Florida. So you need to be in communication with telemetry systems and things that are in other parts of the world that are turned toward you enough that you can be in radio communication with them. And since you need to coordinate with all these different time zones, what people in low Earth orbit do is they use standard international time, or what's known as Greenwich Mean Time. And so they use universal time, which is based on Greenwich Mean Time. Greenwich is in England, and it's opposite the international date line, and so Greenwich Mean Time is used as the universal standard time for Earth, and so that's what they do when they're in low Earth orbit. And so, for example, the International Space Station keeps universal coordinated time. And so if they were holding midnight mass on the International Space Station, they would do it at midnight Greenwich Mean Time. And I'm sure that the same practice as we move farther out into the solar system will replicate. Now, there might be variations, like if you're on Mars and you have basically a 24-hour day on Mars anyway. Mars's axial rotation is very close to Earth's, so it's pretty much a 24-hour day. You might vary from that. You might have Mars local time with different time zones, and you do midnight mass at midnight on Mars. But if you're not in that kind of environment, if you're in one that is very different from Earth time, then you'd probably use universal time or Greenwich Mean Time from Earth, which would be the standard for communicating between different places in the solar system, just like it's the standard for communicating to different places from low Earth orbit.
Amanda, thank you. Appreciate that question. I think the next question also comes. Let me just. I'm sorry, I just got a little lost there. Yeah, this also comes from Amanda, so we'll do another question from you, Amanda. Thank you so much for them. She asks, since Jesus inherited no DNA from a human father, why is he not a clone of Mary?
Well, so we don't know the final answer to this, but there are a number of possibilities. One is that Jesus used, so we have 23 chromosomes as human beings, and they come in two sets. So we inherit one set of 23 from our father and one set of 23 from our mother. Now, Jesus didn't have a human father, so it could be that God duplicated Mary's DNA. So he took one helix from Mary and then copied it and mirrored the two together and changed her X chromosome, one of her X chromosomes, into a Y chromosome. So it could be that Jesus inherited all of his genetic matter from Mary, but God modified an X chromosome to a Y chromosome. It's also possible God could have created that second pair of 23 chromosomes out of nothing, or modified it out of pre-existing matter. Those are things God could have done. We don't know because they didn't have the understanding of genetics that we do. And so the biblical authors never asked these questions and thus never got answers to them. But if God created a second pair of 23 chromosomes, including an X chromosome, then that might have little or no resemblance to Mary. So those are two possible ways that that Jesus could avoid being just a clone of Mary. If he was a full clone, he would have had two X chromosomes. And since he was a man, we know he didn't, because in humans, if you're going to be a man, you need a Y chromosome. And consequently, he could not have been a full clone of Mary. Those are two ways that God could have accomplished this. Now, you might say, well, what if God took all of the DNA from Mary and just changed that one chromosome so that it was a Y instead of an X? Would he otherwise be a clone of Mary? Would he otherwise be genetically identical to her? And the answer is not necessarily, because we have ourselves each one of us has those two sets of 23 chromosomes. So let's talk about chromosome 1. I might have a particular variation, or what biologists call an allele, on chromosome 1. Let's say it's an A variation. But then on my second copy of chromosome 1, I've got a different allele that's a B variation. So I have an AB pattern on chromosome 1. But if you took illicitly and made a new human being using just my chromosome 1s, you could have AB like me, or you could have AA or BB. Only the one that had AB like I do would be a clone of chromosome 1 for me. But AA and AB would not be identical to me, even though they have genetic matter coming from me. And so merely the fact that you have all of your genetic matter coming from a single parent doesn't mean that you're a clone of that parent.
Wow. All right. Amanda, you got us two great questions. Thank you very much. Jimmy Akin is our guest. We're doing weird Christmas questions today with Jimmy Akin. We'll take a break now and come back with more weird weird Christmas questions for Jimmy right after this.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
The Aquinas Writing Advantage program is part of Homeschool Connections' set of online courses for your Catholic homeschool. Homeschool Connections' website is homeschoolconnections.com.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
People often wonder about the power of prayer. Why do we pray anyway if we end up having to do so much work for ourselves? Well, the reality is, when we find ourselves up against a wall and we pray, it's like God turns a light up on the other side of that wall. Brighter and brighter and brighter until the light shines through the tiniest cracks. God might not do it all for me, but He shows me how to make my work more efficient so that together we can accomplish all things through His grace.
Merry Christmas and welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Thanks for being with us during this Christmas season. We're just delighted to get to spend some time with you. We're always grateful that you do listen. And if you want to know more about us, you can visit
Sure, I can take over. Okay. So our next question comes from Michael, and he wants to know, would Jesus already know where Joseph and Mary hid his presents? This is an interesting question because, Christmas is the birthday of Jesus. And parents commonly give their children birthday presents, and they will, to make them a surprise, they'll hide those birthday presents before birthdays, and so not let the kids see them. And so if Mary and Joseph followed our present birthday customs, they could easily have done that with Jesus. They could have said, okay, it's time for your birthday, and here are the presents we got for you. But they probably didn't, because we don't have evidence that ordinary first century Jews celebrated birthdays the way we do. We do have indications that upper class Jews did, especially in royal circles. The Gospels, for example, record the birthday at which one of the Herods had his stepdaughter dance, and Salome, and she pleased him so much that he was willing to give her the head of John the Baptist. And so we do have evidence that upper class Jews did this, but poor people like Jesus's family, and we do have evidence from the biblical text that they were poor, we really don't have evidence of them celebrating birthdays. But let's suppose they did. Would Jesus in that case know where Mary and Joseph hid his presents? Well, he would know in his divine intellect, because in his divine intellect, he knows everything. He's omniscient, and therefore he would know what the presents were and where they were hidden from all eternity in his divine intellect. The question is, what would he know in his human intellect? Well, according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, Jesus, in his human intellect, knew everything that pertained to his mission on earth. And so if a present that he was receiving was essential to his mission, he would know about that. He would at least know something about it in his human intellect by virtue of his mission-oriented consciousness. On the other hand, the Catechism also acknowledges that there are things that Jesus, since he was living in a human state, would have to learn about the way that ordinary humans have to learn about them. And so he would have to experience things and ask about things and such as that. And so if a present was not related to his mission, then the Catechism would seem to indicate that he would not know where it was because what it was, because that's something that one in the human condition must learn by experience and by asking about it and so forth. On the other hand, John seems to indicate that Jesus could pierce the secrets of human hearts when he chose to, and hypothetically, if the young Jesus really wanted to know where his presents were, he might have been able to just read that out of Mary and Joseph's hearts and find out.
It was a good skill to have. Thanks, Michael, for that question. Jack, another time traveling question as we do weird Christmas questions with Jimmy Akin. If I slow it down, I can say it. Jack asks, if a time traveler were to discover that the Nativity really occurred in 6 BC or 4 BC, would we adjust our calendar system to reflect that?
I don't think so. The reason is that the current epoch system, the era system that we use so that this is the year 2020, is based on an initial calculation that Jesus was born in 1 BC. Now, there is no year 0 in this system because this was designed before the numeral 0 came into common use. So Jesus, according to the original calculations, was born in 1 BC. But we already have established that it looks like he was born before that. A common theory you will hear is that he was born like between 6 and 4 BC. I don't think that's accurate. I think that itself is a miscalculation. I think the evidence actually shows he was born in 3 or 2 BC. But either way you go, we already have evidence that he was born before 1 BC, and yet we haven't changed the system. It has become so common and it's so ingrained in world consciousness now. It's even used by many people who aren't Christian at all. And it would be very hard to get all 7 billion of us currently, or however many there are, to say, okay, we're going to adjust this year now for religious reasons that we don't all share. And so I think that would be a very difficult task. So even if we got proof via time travel of the specific year that Jesus was born, I think that we wouldn't adjust the system because certainly not in the short term because of how ingrained it is.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate that time traveler question. We've done a lot of time traveling today with Jimmy Akin because it's weird Christmas questions with Jimmy Akin today on Catholic Answers Live. Next weird question comes from Anthony. As a Greek-speaking bishop, would St. Nicholas follow the Julian or the Gregorian calendar for his celebration of Christmas?
So St. Nicholas, when he was alive, would definitely have used the Julian calendar. Now, for people who may not be familiar, the Julian calendar is a modification of the Roman calendar that was introduced by Julius Caesar. That's why it's called the Julian calendar. Prior to Julius Caesar's time, the Roman calendar had gotten out of sync with the seasons in a significant way. So you would have, a month that should fall in spring really happening in summer or something like that. And so Caesar consulted the priests and said, let's develop a calendar that would fix this. And the way they did was by adding a leap day in February to keep the calendar. They also had to have a massive one-year adjustment known as the Year of Madness that had over 400 days in it. But they did the massive one-time adjustment, and then they had the modification that would largely keep it in sync. And that's why the Julian calendar became very common. And it was the standard form of the Roman calendar in the Roman Empire, including Asia, where St. Nicholas lived, during St. Nicholas's lifetime. So there's no question he would have used the Julian calendar. The Gregorian calendar was not developed until the 1500s, because even though the leap day helped keep the calendar in sync with the seasons, it wasn't fully precise. It was off by, I think, 6 minutes a year. And over the course of the centuries, that would add up, and the calendar would start drifting from the seasons again. And by the 1500s, that had become obvious. And it was complicating things like the celebration of Easter, which is tied to the seasons because it's based on the spring equinox. And so consequently, Pope Gregory went to the priests, this time Christian priests, who were also astronomers, and also Nicholas Copernicus as well, and said, find us a fix so that we won't have this problem in the future. So they proposed, again, a one-time adjustment to bring everything back in line. I think it was like 13 days. And then they proposed an additional fix, which was, we'll have the leap day every 4 years unless the year is divisible by 100, so it won't happen in 1700 and 1800, but we will have it if it's divisible by 400. So we will have the leap day in 1600 and 2000 and 2400. And that rule will keep the Gregorian calendar tied to the seasons on Earth, unless the Earth's rotation changes, for thousands of years. So we use it today, and it gradually spread over the world, as the civil calendar, although in some Eastern Christian circles, they still use the Julian calendar for liturgical purposes.
Thank you so much for that question. Jimmy, did you know St. Teresa of Avila was born on the day they changed the calendar? So there's always confusion around her birthday.
Really?
Yeah, and how old she would, because people, even though it's, she has a birthday, it's on the exact day that they changed the calendar. So
the way to solve that is specify, this is the terminology they would use during the transition period. Is it the old style date or the new style date?
Yeah, right.
So indeed. You just need to say she was born on this day old style and this day new style.
Indeed. Jack, thanks very much. That one was from Anthony. Thank you, Anthony, for that. David asks this: could the baby Jesus have developed colic? If Jesus was like us in all things but sin, does that mean he got sick?
So it's possible for Jesus to preserve himself from physical illnesses miraculously, because he is the great healer. So if he had chosen, he could avoid getting colic as a baby, but it's not clear that this would happen, because he chose to be born into a fallen human condition where he was physically vulnerable to attack. I mean, that's what happened on the cross. He was physically attacked and nailed to the cross, and he died. And so if he can be attacked by macroscopic things like nails or whips, he could also, in principle, be attacked by microscopic things like viruses and bacteria. And so if you look at colic specifically, colic can be produced by a variety of different causes. It can involve an imbalance in the ratio of a baby's gut bacteria, because we have this whole microbiome inside of us that's based on what we've eaten, on what we've been what germs, beneficial bacteria we've been exposed to. And clearly, in an underdeveloped world with shaky nutrition at best, he could have been exposed to a mix of gut bacteria that wouldn't have been pleasant. So that could cause colic in the baby Jesus. Also, sometimes colic may be caused by allergies, where your immune system responds very vigorously to something. And if he's the great healer, he could have a vigorous immune system. On the other hand, there are other possible physical issues that could cause colic, and I can't exclude in principle that this would not have happened, but I also can't show that it would have happened because we simply don't have that evidence.
Thanks, David, for that question. I got that wrong. Teresa Avila died on either October 4th or October 15th. That's the one that you always have to say. Her death was either October 4th, depending on how you count the days. Anne asks this. We better do this one quickly, Jimmy, because I got to get a couple questions to get to. What will they use for Christmas trees on Mars?
Initially, they will almost certainly use artificial trees because we won't have good agriculture on Mars at first, and what agriculture we do have won't be given to growing trees, but food. So initially, it will certainly be artificial trees, whether plastic or aluminum or whatever you may have. But over the course of time, presumably you could have tree farming on Mars that would result in natural Christmas trees.
It's a day to look forward to. Anne, thanks very much for that question. It's Weird Christmas Questions with Jimmy Akin. Jason asks this, Jimmy. Should the church be making a bigger deal about the Feast of the Annunciation rather than the Nativity in order to emphasize that Christ was incarnate on earth 9 months before he was technically born on Christmas?
So the reason that humans celebrate birth rather than conception is because birth is a very objectively verifiable event. We know when someone gets born. It is a big dramatic thing when someone gets born. It's very obvious to everyone in the family. When someone is conceived is not. When someone is conceived is something that happens maybe without the parents even being aware that it's happening, and certainly not for weeks afterwards are they likely to be aware that a conception has happened. So that's why we culturally emphasize birthdays rather than conception days. Now, in the future, that may change. It may change due to a couple of reasons. One is the advent of abortion in our culture has directed more attention to conception. And I think that will cause Christians to, and has caused Christians to think more about Jesus' conception rather than simply his birth. On the other hand, as we go forward technologically, it's possible to detect conception much earlier. It's even possible that in the future, there could be real-time monitoring if we have nanites in our bodies. And so that could result in a long-term shift to even more focus on conception and more focus on the Annunciation as the liturgical celebration of that for Christ.
Thank you so much for that question. Jimmy Akin, thank you so much for taking 2 hours and doing Weird Christmas Questions with us.
My pleasure, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you too, Jimmy. Again, you can find Jimmy at Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, and a new year is about to begin. If you're the kind of person who's like to have something to do each day, you might check out Jimmy's book, A Daily Defense 300, which provides 365 plus one different apologetics questions and answers that you can do throughout the year. We'll see you tomorrow, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.